Welcome back to Ladies Who Create, a show where we'll be interviewing the incredibly inspiring women who are trailblazing the design and creative industries. I'm your co-host, Liz Meyer, a creative director and half of a Datalands duo.
And I'm your other co-host, Jess Rosenberg, and I'm a creative director currently working in the tech industry.
In today's interview, we're diving into the fascinating career journey of Kelin Zhang. Kelin has navigated through roles in the tech and design fields, ultimately carving out a successful independent practice. We'll discuss her early days at Ueno, her significant experiences at Twitter, and the influence of generative AI on her creative process, leading to her latest project, Poetry Camera. Join us as we explore how strategic career decisions and small moments have profoundly shaped her path. So, hello, Kelin. How are you?
I'm good. I'm calling in from a beautiful spring day in Brooklyn right now.
Nice. Gorgeous. So we wanted to kind of get background on you. Just give us like a little overview of your career thus far. Anything you want to, tell everyone about.
All right. Let's go back to the beginning, to childhood.
Yeah, no pressure. No.
Yeah. I was born. No, I was always a really artsy kid, but I had very pragmatic immigrant parents who were like, you can't be an artist, you can't feed yourself that way. So I did the practical thing and I studied computer science in college. And what I learned from that experience was I loved making things and seeing how people reacted to what I make. But I didn't particularly love a lot of the day-to-day work of software engineering, which is reading other people's code, writing maintainable code, thinking about scalable systems, all of that stuff. So after graduating from a computer science program, I hard pivoted into design. And I landed my first full-time job being the first design hire at Ueno, which is a design studio that no longer exists because it was acquired by Twitter. But at the time, it was a design studio that worked with a whole range of clients across tech, cultural institutions, media, finance, a lot of different industries. And I really cut my teeth there learning how to design. And from there, I was at Ueno for 4 years. And after growing with an organization for 4 years, I was like, who am I outside of the context of this studio? Who am I as a designer? Who am I as a person? So I just left with no plan and ended up freelancing. And one of my first clients that I worked with was a political tech startup. And so throughout the 2020 election cycle, I worked with them to design this volunteer organizing platform for political candidates. After 2020, Hallie, the owner of Ueno, called me back up and he was like, hey, now that the election's over, would you have any interest in coming back to Ueno? And specifically, I'm selling Ueno to Twitter. Would you like to join Twitter? And I was like, well, that's perfect timing. I've been thinking about joining Twitter. And that happened. And then I was at Twitter for 2 years working on Twitter Spaces, and almost 2 years. I was at Twitter for almost 2 years working on Twitter Spaces, which is a new audio product that they were launching. And after brief pause. I'm still trying to find the right words to talk about my Twitter experience. So I may have the most let me go back and rephrase that moments when talking about Twitter.
We'll ask about Twitter a little bit later also. Yeah. That can just be, you can overview it and then we'll just get back to it. Or if you don't want to talk about, if it's a traumatic moment, don't need to talk about it also.
I worry that I may be spending too long on the intro, so I will just
it's
perfect.
No, this is amazing. I also totally forgot about Every Action and Mobilize.
Yes. Oh my god, I forgot about Every Action too. Mobilize got acquired.
Holy
towards the tail end of my time there. We worked
on that.
I had the joy of working with Datalands on some Mobilize stuff. I worked on new audio products, including Twitter Spaces, which was like a giant voice group chat that you could have on Twitter.
It was cool. It's kind of like Clubhouse.
It's like a podcast. Yeah.
We're like a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Like a live podcast.
It was cool. Spaces was cool.
Yeah, it's still around.
I thought it was like a really smart way for them to integrate a new feature, for them to augment what was already happening on Twitter and like with the written word, and injecting audio just felt like a really smart move on their part. I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't take credit for that. There were much much smarter people higher up than me who made those higher level decisions. But it was really cool to think about how to take this new mechanic that had been invented and adapt it to the needs of an existing platform, an existing user base, in a way that felt really natural to the context of this existing product. So it was a mix of 0 to 1 product and thinking about this existing ecosystem. And after Twitter, I always knew that after Twitter, I wanted to take a year to explore what I wanted to work on next. And I basically this year kind of coincided with ChatGPT coming out, and I hadn't been super in tune with what was happening in the generative model space before. I was briefly aware of, GPT-2, GPT-3, but when ChatGPT came out, I stayed up until 5 a.m. playing with it. I was like, oh my God, this is blowing my mind. Like, computers work fundamentally differently now from what I had experienced growing up. It's no longer, oh, I tell the computer to do something, here are these exact rules, and it follows the rules. This is now, the computer can talk back to me now. And I was like, wow, this is such an exciting time for me as a software product designer to think about all of the new possibilities that you have with computers now. And so I was just so excited to dive into designing directly with this new material that had emerged, these generative models. And in this year of exploration, I basically learned how to code again. I hadn't coded since my computer science degree. I learned how to code again with the help of ChatGPT, and I just started making ideas that came to me that were either the process of making it was assisted by these generative models helping me to code, or I was working with these generative models directly as material, or both. And so I feel like I basically completely reinvented my creative practice in the past year. And so I've continued down this independent path of exploration. I've been doing a mix of client work and my own projects. A couple of the projects that I've worked on independently have included my first iOS app, Trash Baby, which is this really chaotic image mixing app, and also Poetry Camera, which is a Harvard project that is a camera that prints poems of what it sees. And that's where I am now.
That's awesome. Thanks for that rundown. I love the journey that you've had. It's so inspiring, especially hearing about you kind of like taking control of your career after Twitter and venturing into your solo practice, and how AI has, kind of re-inspired you again, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've been working for clients since the beginning of my career, right? And ever since, leaving my first job, leaving that job at Ueno, leaving the studio practice, I always wanted to figure out a way to become more proactive in my work. Doing a lot of client work, it was a really great way of sampling a lot of different types of projects, but it was always reactive in some way. Like, a client has a need, they come to me, and then I solve their problem for them. And I wanted to really discover who I was as a creative. Like, what would I do if a client didn't come to me? And I was just thinking of things to make myself. And now, I'm both inspired by the possibilities of these generative models, and also the fact that these generative models exist and can help me do more things more easily. It helps me be more ambitious too in what projects I take on and what I reach for.
Yeah, I feel like when you started talking about Trash Baby, which I love the name.
Thank you. I can't take credit for the name. It was Steph, who was also a guest on this podcast.
Okay.
I was just like, this is such a great name. I need to figure out a project to make worthy of this name.
It's a good name. But when you started talking about that and openly referring to how you were building it, using GPT to get the code right and like testing against it, it was so inspirational to me. I feel like for my career, I've been kind of similar, like working for clients, doing what they want, figuring out their problems, blah, blah. But seeing other people take control of their career and just go for something is so inspirational to me. And the fact that I know you have coding experience, you went to school for it, but
You'd be surprised.
yeah.
I worked very hard to block that out of my memory.
Okay. Then I guess that's fine. I guess you started from scratch at that point. But that's still, it's so cool to know that if, say I want to go into like game design or something, I can probably do it now. It's not going to be like a 4-year college experience. It's more of setting my mind to something and just going for it.
I have this Post-it taped up above my desk that says, there has never been a better time to be a beginner. Like, not only do we have really personalized educational tools like ChatGPT now to bounce ideas off of or to ask the most basic questions to without feeling stupid or ashamed or all of the awkward feelings that come with learning something new. There's also so many resources online through YouTube and just the broader internet now that it's so easy to get started in anything that you want. I think the hard part now comes down to figuring out how to stay motivated and reach for that goal that you want to reach for. And that's like fighting my own psychology. The ups and downs of that has been by far the hardest part of the independent journey so far.
Yeah. There's so many things to learn right now. There's like too many things almost.
Well, I think I love having a project idea in mind and then figuring out, okay, what is the shortest path to making that specific project? I have never been very good at being like, I'm going to learn X skill. Like, I'm going to learn 3D, which I told myself so often through the course of just being a designer. I think so many designers have this. It's almost a meme. Like, I'm going to learn how to make stuff in 3D. I never learned it. But if I had a particular thing in my mind that I wanted to build, then whatever it is that I need to do, just now you could just Google ChatGPT, pick up everything. You're that.
Yeah, definitely the 3D is a problem. I jump around. We talked about this a few months ago, actually, Kelin and I, about how like hobbies, jumping from hobby to learning new things, and it's like a theme in my life. So I appreciate that in other people. Going back a little bit to Ueno, because Ueno is like one of those companies that I think every designer always wanted to work at. It was like a dream kind of place. What was that like being the first hire at like such a major studio?
Yeah. So to clarify, I was the first American employee and the first designer hired, but there were 3 front-end engineers who were working in Iceland at the time when I joined. So when I joined, Hallie was in San Francisco. I was also in San Francisco. And I guess a lot of the day-to-day experience did feel like just us because we were in the office together in person. And he was very often working with the developers in Iceland, working remotely with them, I mean. And I mean, I suppose there was a halo that developed around the studio over time, but at the time when I joined, none of that existed. And I actually found the job through just following Hallie on Twitter. I was looking for a design job and I saw that, he was just tweeting like, oh, hey, anyone want to work on cool projects in San Francisco? And I was familiar with his work through Dribble, and I immediately jumped at the chance. I DM'd him. And apparently later, I was the only person who DM'd him.
Oh, really?
I found this out later. Like people think it's some that had to be like so super special and smart and all that to get. No, it was luck, good timing, and I think for me, immediately when I met Hallie in person, I realized that I felt very safe in his presence. I felt I was looking for a job where I wasn't going to be scared that I was going to be fired all the time. And I definitely felt really safe and supported in his presence. I felt like I could make mistakes and he would be like, okay, so you made a mistake, try again, or, help me through that. And that was really what I was looking for in my first role. And of course, it helped that I had access to these incredible projects that I never would have been able to see in other environments, and that he also was learning the ins and outs of running a studio and managing people for the first time. So he kind of gave me free reign to do to explore widely and do a lot of things on my own. I had a lot of autonomy, and that was I was so lucky to have that experience. But it all kind of came back to, at the end of the day, feeling very safe and understood by Hallie. One of the first conversations that we had, we were just getting to know each other, working on projects, and he was asking like, "Oh, what about your family? Like, what do your parents do?" And I was like, "Well, my dad passed away when I was 15." And he was like, "Oh, my mom passed away when I was a kid too, and it never really leaves you." And I was like, "Oh, he gets it." And I think that was one of the moments where I'm just like, okay, here was one of the things where it felt hard for me to relate to a lot of other people in life in the workplace who hadn't experienced that sort of thing, and here was someone who understood. And that also made a really big impression on me. Yeah.
That's really nice. Like that. Yeah. I mean, of course, when you join a company like that as first designer, you're not going to see like the sparkle and shine that everyone else eventually sees down the
everything
road.
was duct taped together. It was me duct taping things together, setting up IT stuff.
Okay, well, that's actually really interesting because you should give yourself more credit for that then, because I didn't know that you were, like so instrumental in setting the whole thing up. And I think that's a story that I want to know more about.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was just a lot of like setting up accounts, 1Password.
But it's still like that.
Yeah.
That's what I do a lot of at my studio. And I gotta say, it takes up most of my day to do all of this administrative work that you don't really think of when you are thinking about running a studio and sending the invoices and talking to new clients and sending out decks and blah, blah, blah. There's so much to it. And if your principal is busy doing like the work with the engineers and managing that stuff, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. You give yourself credit.
Thank you.
You made that place work.
Well, I think again, there were so many people that we were able to bring in to help out with that stuff. I don't want to take too much credit. And also, the fact that I had the opportunity to work on these things, it's also because Hallie had built up the reputation, the portfolio of work to be able to bring in those clients. And also, it was my first job out of school where I had no idea what was expected in a job. So it was like, okay, yeah, sure. You jump from like evaluating portfolios, interviewing designers, figuring out how to set up a hiring pipeline, to figuring out all of this IT account stuff and software stuff, to actually designing work for clients and presenting to clients. And I was just like, oh, that's just a normal job. And maybe it is, but that was what was normal for me.
Were you surprised going into it from like the point you DM'd Hallie? So like when you started, did you go in thinking like, oh, I'm going to be a designer, I'll be one of the first designers. And then you get there and you're like, wait, I'm actually setting up all this IT stuff and doing so much more than design.
Was I surprised? I think I was surprised by the projects that I got to work on. As a new grad, being able to work on projects with like Apple, right out of the gate with clients that were trying to redesign their product or create a new product or rebrand. That felt so exciting to me as someone who, remember, I was coming from a computer science degree. I had one design internship under my belt, and the scale of what I was working on was immediately just so, I was, starstruck by that sort of scale coming out of school. And all the other things that I did, that was kind of almost secondary. It was just like, oh yeah, like of course these are the things that you need to do in order to make these projects work. And I had a lot of fun doing that too, because I was like, yeah, let me figure out how to do all of this administrative stuff, or like everything was just new and exciting. And that was a lot of fun.
Those operational things they're easy to forget, but they're it really teaches you how to set up, your own practice in the future and I think a lot of designers don't get that education in school, the part of the building of a business. You get how do you make a client happy? How do you, build them at the end of the day, all that stuff, but not about, hey, there's like this huge runway of things that you have to do in order to have all that stuff actually keep coming in. So that's really cool. And especially doing that for Ueno, like that, you got like a really amazing education.
I'm so grateful for that experience to see something go from just such a nascent studio, an independent freelance practice, to a full-on studio. And so that really always kind of gave me the confidence to, run my own independent studio practice as well. Because I was like, oh, I've already seen that.
You did it once.
Let's did it once, yeah.
And you saw the scale too. Like that's exciting also. Not even just the fact of that how to do it. You saw it go from this small thing to like this behemoth in a way. It's not like Ueno is a behemoth, but like a heavy hitter in the design industry.
Yeah, a couple of the things that I really learned that I think were so special in retrospect. One is seeing how to build a business off of like pure social media marketing. Hallie was incredible at making sure that everyone knew about the latest work that Ueno was doing on Twitter, on Dribbble. We were very visible online. And you have to do that when you're coming into an industry with no prior connections. And Hallie was very much an outsider coming in from Iceland, right? With no prior really connections in Silicon Valley in tech. And he was able to build all of that from scratch through online marketing. So that was one thing that was just a really valuable lesson for me to watch that pay off. The second thing that has been so special to observe and live is the fact that this was a business that is a more classic small business, is self-funded, bootstrapped, and never raised outside investment, never raised venture capital. I think so many of my peers, their entire careers have been funded by venture capital. And for me to live this whole other path, it just opens up the world of possibilities for me and thinking about how do I make my own practice sustainable. It doesn't necessarily have to rely on outside investment or a particular type of investment. And being able to expand my experiences in that way just helps me helps me stay open-minded as I continue moving forward in my career. And I know that like with the current the end of zero interest rates, and the current state of the industry, it is like I know my friends who have built their entire careers off of more like the traditional, more VC funded company path. They are wondering like what does the future look like? And I think I need to believe that there are more models that are possible.
Yeah, that is a deep concern for a lot of people right now. It's well, I guess actually that's interesting that you say that, because you went from Ueno to freelance practice, then to Twitter. So what made you want to get back into tech after? I know we're like glossing over your freelance practice, that interim, but
I think one was wanting to work with, Hallie and the Ueno team again. I really missed them during my time outside of the studio. And also, I was very curious about Twitter specifically because of its place in politics and culture. My freelance practice was a lot of it was centered around mobilize and political tech. So it was that was just a whole different world that I got exposed to, and I was really kind of transforming my values and thinking about what is it that I want to work on, what world do I want to create? How do I want to use my limited energy and time on this earth? And I would want to be working towards building a world that I wanted to live in. And Twitter specifically was a product that I had used that I felt like had been responsible for my entire career. And it was so I just felt like there was so much I could learn there from designing for such a large base of users, from working on this iconic product that I had grown up with, and also from working within a large organization in an in-house capacity that I hadn't gotten the chance to experience before. So all of that was really, really appealing.
Yeah, that sounds very. I feel like I relate to that so much. It's like the one thing I've not done is big in-house career. Yeah, that's just interesting because it's especially like with the coming era of when it was acquired, did it change a lot? Like, did it, once you were in it and you enjoyed it and then it got acquired, like, was it, we could gloss over this, talk about it too much, but
I am so grateful for my time at Twitter, and both the time that was more of a typical in-house experience and the time that was, oh, I am living history.
yeah.
Because being on the other side of that experience, I'm just like, wow, I just lived. Oh, oh my god.
Who does that? I can never replicate it. It's so weird.
Oh my god, you didn't even do anything.
No, I did not do anything. Oh my god, that's so
wow,
funny.
maybe it's projecting. We will cut that for you.
I think it's hilarious.
Okay.
So I had a very particularly interesting end of Twitter experience where I was also the lead designer on Blue Verified, which was the first product launch after the acquisition that the new leadership, took on. And again, living inside one of the biggest stories in the world and coming out the other side and being like, oh, I just had this really extreme experience and I got through it totally fine. And I was, able to handle myself throughout all of that. That just gave me endless confidence. And I'm so grateful. There are so many things that you could learn by reading a book or hearing about other people's experiences, and not have it really stick until you actually live that experience. And to get that opportunity to go through something so intense and be forced to grow and change and come out the other side, it's just been a huge part of who I am. It has become a huge part of who I am, and it's really shaped who I am today. And it really gave me the confidence to pursue doing my own thing and staying independent for, the last year plus now.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. If you are open to zooming in to the Twitter Blue Verified project, and what specifically about that experience would you say, gave you that sort of confidence on the other end of it?
Going back a little bit, Blue Verified. So basically, in my role on that project, it was, the time leading up to the acquisition, like things were just getting increasingly weird internally for 6 months. And then everything kind of became exponentially weirder than I could have ever imagined after the deal closed. And I remember I was at a wedding on a weekend. I'm normally based in New York. I was in San Francisco for a wedding. And the morning after the wedding, I was sitting at this brunch, at the post-wedding brunch, and I get a call from Esther, who is leading the Blue Verified project and who I had worked with before on Twitter Spaces. And she was like, hey, we pulled together a team to work on this new project for leadership last night. Can you jump on? And I'm like, well, I'm about to head to the airport in like 30 minutes to go back to New York. I'm just like, could you cancel that flight? And don't worry about booking a return flight. We'll figure it out. I'm like, okay, like let me go on up to HQ right now and just jump on and help out. And it was really important at the time. Well, I think that the reason I jumped on was because for two reasons. One, it was really important for the broader organization, I think, to make a good impression on new leadership, to show that we could deliver, and that whatever public reputation, to show that we could deliver and that we could execute quickly. The second thing was that I really enjoy putting myself in extreme situations and, forcing myself through that, and then getting to the other side and growing. And so I did. And over the course of that, I was only working on this for a couple weeks, but it really did feel like several months, if not a year. And a couple of the things that I experienced firsthand, basically, I got the opportunity to see the reality of the story that was going down, and not have the filtered experience through the media, like other people's secondhand, like the secondhand or third hand impression I might have of an experience just through seeing the headlines. And I feel like that really brought the whole experience down to a much more human scale and made me recognize that so much of this world is shaped by people who are no different than us. And this is something that I'd, heard in quotes. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds nice, but like, you're special. Like you have had there's something innately different about you. And I think this experience really it really hammered home for me that, like, again, this world is shaped by people who are no different than you or I. And it was very empowering. Like, oh yeah, I have what it takes to just go ahead and do the thing. Yeah. And I try to hold on to that every day.
That's a really good takeaway. I think that's something I have really only recently felt myself. Like, why am I not taking opportunities that I should be taking? Why do I feel like I can't do stuff? And like a tech mogul, where do they come from? They might have some family money or something behind them, but like they probably just are in the right place at the right time to say yes to the things that kind of are like happening around them. They jump into things, they do stuff that you wouldn't expect. They do put themselves through those weird trial and error kind of moments. And
confidence. I think it comes down to confidence. And if you have it, regardless of where it comes from, you will put yourself in those moments, you will go for it, you'll do the thing. And if you don't have it, it's a lot harder to do those things, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's all, at the end of the day, I think everything is just the mental game, right? That you have with yourself and being able to navigate your own psychology. And so much of, especially in an independent practice, right, where you're just left with yourself. And even now, I find myself counting myself out of things, being like, not necessarily being like, oh, I'm not good enough to do that, but being like, oh, other people wouldn't be interested in what I have to offer, or projecting or assuming things about other people that may or may not be true. And I'm still like learning to navigate that and overcome it. But I think my main takeaway from that Twitter experience has been, when it comes to me and what I think I'm capable of, absolutely. Like, this world is shaped by people who are no different than you or I. And so, just go for it.
Yeah, that's so nice. I mean, that's actually a really beautiful way to think about your time there too. Even though it was a lot, but how long is life really? What are you going to say no to
Exactly.
everything? You're going to just not go for stuff? Just
Yeah, life is so short. I mean, that was another thing that that has really shaped my own practice, but also even from my time at Ueno, one of the company values was life is short, enjoy it. And I had mentioned before how my dad passed away when I was really young. I was always aware of how short life is and mortality. And I think a lot about like, oh, when am I going to die? And in thinking about that, especially a lot in the past year, I've been thinking like, if I died tomorrow, would I be happy doing would I be happy that I died doing this? And if the answer was no, then I'd be like, I would need to course correct. But very often the answer is yes. So that's when I know I'm on the right path. Yeah.
yeah, that's beautiful.
It
That's
is.
like
It's very inspiring. Such a good mechanism to kind of like think about your own happiness levels and ways to prioritize things that you might want to do, but maybe you're too scared to.
Yeah. I think, I spend a lot of time talking to my mom now, and she's been very supportive of me pursuing this independent path. And she is reflecting back on her youth. She's like, I spent so much time being scared when I was younger. And then I look back and now I'm like, I'm not scared anymore, but I don't have the youth to act on all the things that I want to do now. And what was I so scared for when I was younger? And I'm like, yeah, all the things I'm scared of now in the future, I don't want to regret looking back and being like, oh man, I was just too scared to do that. Just go for it. Just go for it now. You could die tomorrow. And I think some people do get a little freaked out by my very morbid framing of like, come on, like you could die tomorrow. But it has been very helpful for me in how I prioritize and make decisions. It's not necessarily about maximizing like short-term pleasure or happiness, but making sure that I'm really spending my time in a way that I feel like is aligned with my values and is working towards something that I think is meaningful.
okay, so
Anyway,
can you tell us a little bit more about your latest work then with Poetry Camera? Because I think it's so fascinating. It is.
thank you.
It seemed like it was like a light idea that you were talking about on Twitter a little bit. You were like, oh, I'm going to code something that I'm going to put a picture into code and it's going to, put a little haiku out. And then all of a sudden you're coming out with hardware. So can you tell us about that? Because that is life-changing, sort of.
Reinventing photography as we know it.
That's very kind. Full credit for the original idea goes to my friend Ryan, who I'm collaborating with on this project, Ryan Mather. So this was the beginning of last year. I has just started this independent practice. I'm like, I want to make projects of my own. I want to be playing around with AI. I want to make art projects. And so Ryan and I were talking in that context. And he was like, oh yeah, I'd always wanted to like make a camera that prints poems of what it sees. And I'm like, huh. And he was like, yeah, like, I want to, maybe I'll just hire someone to do it. I'm like, I bet I could figure out how to do that. And so for me, it started out more as an exercise in programming. So what I mentioned before about having a project to structure all of my learning around, I was like, this is a good starter project to structure my learning around. And within a couple days, I had a working software and hardware prototype. And it did not work well, to be clear. I was, this was, again, January 2023. I was working with, just talking to GPT 3.5, like talking to ChatGPT, and like, hey, I want to build this. I want to work with a Raspberry Pi. How do I put everything together? How do I get started? And just continually asking ChatGPT, how do I do this next thing? How do I do this next thing? And then following down that path. And I was using the super, super old AI models, like Google Cloud Vision from 2018, which was much like, it was pretty far behind the state of the art, but I didn't know anything. I was just getting started. I was like duct taping that together with some GPT-3 output poems. And somehow, like, just by getting a very basic, like not very accurate, very like inefficient and slow prototype together and getting that working end to end, that was already just really motivating for me as someone who liked making things. Like, wow, like I didn't know how to code really 3 days ago. And now I have something that's working. And all of that was just because, the barrier to getting started and the barriers to debugging, that was all really lowered so much by being able to talk to ChatGPT. And then putting that together into a physical form factor. I mean, my background is all in software design, right? All in pixels on a screen. Having this tactile thing that I could interact with, that was just so motivating. You're like, wow, here's this whole new playground that's opened up, right? New techniques and new mediums that just felt so refreshing and rejuvenating, especially since I had already become so familiar with one domain of design that I was that I felt like I wasn't even learning that much in anymore. I was so excited by all the new learning that came up. Anyway, so that was this initial prototype that I put together. It was a little cardboard box. And it's like, it's cute. People see it, they're like, it's a cute project. And, we brought it around to some demos and people like, that's cute. And then I kind of put that on the back burner a bit while Ryan, who has a background in industrial design, he worked on designing this really polished enclosure for it. And so for most of last year, for most of 2023, I actually, that project was kind of in the back of my mind. It's like, okay, I did that. Now on to other stuff. And then I think the project really started gaining momentum again when Ryan finished this really polished enclosure, and it really speaks to the power of design when, you put things in a very, you layer on this polished presentation of it and immediately people react to it differently. And instead of, this is like a cute project, people's reactions become, where can I buy this? And we went around filming TikToks with it because that was always our end goal, is just to make some fun TikToks, giving poems to strangers around Washington Square Park. And that was when, things really started taking off online. The algorithm blessed us with visibility and also new opportunities. We got reached out for collaborations, events, and things like that. And from there, we got so much inbound interest. I was like, wow, okay, like let's keep iterating on it. Yeah, this project has some legs, and we keep iterating on it based on our experiences using it, based on our experiences testing it out with real people, deploying it at these events. And then from there, like every time we share it at an event, it gives us more motivation and more feedback to continue iterating on it. And the more work we put into it, the more people got excited about it, the more people kept asking, where can I get one of my own? And I never envisioned it as a product, as a consumer product that people would buy. And for the longest time, I was like, no, you can't buy it. We were like, this is an art project. You can't buy it. You can learn how to make your own. There's instructions online. We want everyone else to be able to experience this magic. But I think recently, I think the reception has gotten to the point of like people being so positive and supportive and excited. And I continue to be excited about all the new things that I'm learning over the course of building it. And basically, I've kind of found something like, what if we did make it more available to people through producing more units somehow? Whether that's through just assembling a couple more units like the ones we already have, or potentially going down the manufacturing route and maybe bringing a new hardware product to market. There are so many new things so many questions that I don't have the answer to going down that path, but also so many new things I'm really excited to learn. Basically, just the project continues, and I'm very excited to see where this goes.
Well, it's so cool.
My question is like, where can I buy like 10 of these, Lisa?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. ASAP is not necessarily possible.
Like tomorrow, can I go to Adorama or something? I'm just like,
we are working on someone did buy 2 units from us.
congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yes, and they are very aware of the fact that these are still development prototypes. It's that there's going to be a lot of rough edges, a lot of new issues that are discovered, and they just want to support the project. Right. So much of the prototype that we've been sharing around right now, there's so many quirks to it because it's a prototype, right? It's like, oh, you actually have to carry this giant battery pack around, and there's all these wires, and it doesn't connect to new Wi-Fi networks, and we have to hotspot tether it to our phone. All of these, sort of all of these rough edges of the prototype, we had to kind of sand down in order to prepare it for someone who might be expecting a consumer grade product. And we're trying to set expectations. Again, this is still a prototype, but this is much more, much more flexible, not necessarily battle tested, but much more capable of being handled in like outside of like very delicate laboratory conditions and very delicate demo conditions.
Did you have to work with someone that does? I know Ryan via like Hundreds and Pseudo, right? And all that stuff. I didn't know he was an industrial designer. That's really cool.
His background is industrial design.
That's so cool. I didn't know that. Did you have to consult with someone that does more like consumer level industrial design to like figure out how to package everything into this small space that could be manufactured, or are you getting there?
So we haven't yet reached the point of designing something that is manufacturable. Excuse me. So that's one of the significant chunks of work that I'm very excited to take on. But for this initial prototype that we've sold, it continues to be a Raspberry Pi prototype. And if we get to the more advanced like DFM ready prototypes, we'll just go in and swap it out. Like this is really the beginning of more of a partnership with this customer rather than like, here you have a unit that you can buy off the shelf like any other consumer electronics product. Goodbye and good luck. It's more of the beginning of a working partnership. And so for this prototype, it's just been me and Ryan and ChatGPT.
ChatGPT, your other, like your employee.
Yeah, our third collaborator.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to hopefully emphasize and communicate though is that this project has always been about, like for me, this project has always been about creating new experiences using generative models, and that couldn't be otherwise. It's not necessarily trying to replicate an existing experience. I find that so much of the applications of generative models that I've seen have been, trying to do what humans do, but cheaper, faster, and worse. And I think that is also the root cause of a lot of anxiety around generative models that I see amongst creatives, amongst workers, for very good reason, right? It's been deployed in some very concerning ways. But I do believe very strongly, very deeply that there are so many new experiences, new products, just so many new experiences that could be made through these models that were not possible before. And it's up to designers to really discover that. Like we are so capable of like imagining these new experiences. And now with AI helping us execute on the rest of that vision, it's easier than ever to actually make it possible. So I think that as far as this project goes, in my view, it's always been about like how do we create a new experience that can actually connect people through the magic that a generative model can bring. And we've made a lot of like very deliberate design decisions to try to create these experiences that feel like fun, that invite this sense of play, that bring out people's inner child, and that help people connect with each other. But yeah, basically, I feel like I've kind of gone off on a little bit of a tangent. Just feel like this is my vision for Poetry Camera. But yeah, it's I'm really excited to just also as a maker be playing in this new space with these new materials and processes.
How would you, for designers who aren't as familiar with AI and all of the tools at our disposal these days, especially with like ChatGPT and Midjourney and all of the other, really innovative AI products, what would be your recommendations for designers in getting started and integrating AI into their workflow?
There's a lot of different ways that could manifest. I think it depends on what your goals are. And I think ultimately, everything is still so new that there is no playbook for this. And that could be a really good thing, right? It's an open playing field. And the first step, I think, is really just to play with these things and understand what is possible right now, understand the state of the art, play with ChatGPT, play with Midjourney, and see what you can do with it, with these existing tools that might be able to reflect your own perspective, your own point of view. I feel like a lot of discourse that I see around AI models and AI tools is, oh, it's how good is it at imitating what I can do, what I already have expertise in? And a lot of the discussion centers around that, like, oh, is it being used to replace my expertise? Or, oh, it can't help me in my area of expertise because I already have, a decade of experience in this. I would invite people to think about, instead of the ways that AI might be able to replace things that you already do, how can it augment you in areas that you aren't as familiar with? So for me, that was having AI help me code. And now my practice has completely transformed because I have this new superpower that I didn't have before. And I'm able to reach for projects of a bigger scale, projects that I'm able to reach for projects that I never would have imagined taking on a year ago, 2 years ago, because I feel like I can do so much more now. I can learn so much more now. And so when it comes to creatives who are new with experimenting with AI, not only do I invite you to play with, let's say, image generators, things that can, with tools that can create things in your area of expertise, but also wildly outside of your area of expertise. If you tried to learn something new using AI, like how far would you get? What new things could you create with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I've been using it to do similar things, like reach into the outskirts of my general skill set. So kind of diving more into like web design kind of things, like how can I implement this little interaction that I normally would never know how to do? How can I create some sort of like a data viz that normally I would do it or like we would do it by hand, but maybe we can encode this in a way that makes it happen a lot faster than normal. Just things like I have a particular brand of ADHD where I cannot sit and write for very long, but I have a lot of thought. So I start to outline things now and then I actually love pseudo write, which is your Poetry Camera partner's company. It's a little bit more creative writing, that sort of thing. It would elude, like, I would never even think to bother with writing more creatively, but because I couldn't sit there and just do it. But now it's like AI is allowing people to grow if you let it help you.
I agree. There's like it helps me get past the blank page aspects of a lot of things too. I'm a way better editor than I am writer. And so with tools like, ChatGPT, Jasper, I'm able to just get the first draft done like instantly, which is just amazing if you think about it. You go back in and edit and personalize it. My thing is like, I've always been terrible at intro emails. I like would always spend way too long thinking about like how to introduce each person. And it's just this thing that I keep coming back to that I feel like I'm not great at. And so that's what I've been using ChatGPT for. I'm like, help me write this intro email. And it helps me do it a lot faster.
Yeah. And I find it motivating when the AI output is not what I have. It's just, I feel like the AI output is not very good. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like, I did this. The baseline first step is ask AI to do a version. I'm like, okay, I can definitely do better. Let me go in and like start actually refining this now. And it's just getting over that psychological barrier of getting started is huge for me, because I feel like I can get so in my head so often.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a very universal issue to a lot of people.
Exactly. It's that classic trope of like, oh, you put something off for 6 months and it ended up taking 5 minutes. Yeah.
Every task of mine, I have Post-it notes all over the place, and Jess can, I'm sure, attest to this. Like a very simple task, and I'm like, okay, yes, I'm going to do that, and then I completely forget until 2 days later. And I'm like, I could have just done that when we brought it up. Like, what is up with me? It's just those little things about little fun quirks about each person. But AI, it's here to fix it. That's my opinion.
Only consider scheduling like kids' doctor's appointments and stuff like that, then that will be amazing. Just like a virtual AI assistant that takes care of all life things, I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure it'll be here before we know it, but
yeah,
I can't wait.
And it's like a person, something that you wouldn't normally, it's not like it would take away, for me personally, it wouldn't take away like an executive assistant role. I would never do that. I would never pay someone to do that for me. So it's all those like mental tasks that I just are building up in my head, that if something can help me with it, I would never, actually hire someone to fix my problem. I would just let it build until it explodes. And like, I have a mental breakdown. It's not, I'm not going to like, it's not going to take away a job. Yes, death by 1,000 Post-its and tasks.
Yeah.
Childcare issues.
Yeah, I think there's so many things that are possible with these models, and the technology is changing so quickly that it's not necessarily a black and white of, oh, this is good or oh, this is bad, or it's the best thing since sliced bread and there will be abundance for everyone, versus this is the end of the world as we know it and we're all doomed. There's a lot of gray area in between. I think it is up to all of us to decide to use things in a way, use this new technology in a way that, helps us move towards the type of world that we would want to see, that is productive and constructive and additive.
Totally agree. And there's a lot of evangelism and education that I think we're on the hook for to create that world. Since a lot of people are still likely very, not anti, but apprehensive with the technology.
Very understandably so. Yeah. The best way, I think, to navigate the apprehension is to develop a better understanding of it and to figure out, how to harness this new technology for good, for good ends. Yeah.
Harnessing the superpower.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's cool. I think it's a cool thing.
It's super cool. It is a superpower, and it does feel like magic every time. It's not magic, but it feels like magic.
Yeah. Even now, a year and a half later, it still feels well. I mean, right now there's this OpenAI announcement that's I think happening as we speak. I don't know what it is. I'm so curious. Like, it could be that we walk out of this and be like, oh my God, the world changed again.
Everything's different. I know.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Sorry. I'm now on their website.
Yeah, I'm very eager. I mean, everything likely did change in the past hour. So, and that's the thing with AI. It's constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. like from text prompts to voice prompts to, even that alone, it's like not just text prompting anymore. Like you can voice prompt ChatGPT from your phone or your browser.
Yeah. I will say, I think at the beginning of me pursuing my independent path, I was trying to think, okay, 5 years ahead, like ChatGPT had just come out. Everything in my mind was like, everything's different now. Everything's going to fundamentally change. Let me think 5 years ahead to how people might be doing what I do now. And instead of that being the reality 5 years in the future, let me try to do that now. And now here I am a year later. I've transformed my practice, but I feel like everything in the world has happened actually slower than I expected, in the industry at least. There's still some kind of open-endedness, some apprehension around how to incorporate it. Not necessarily that. There's also a lot of inertia, right? Based on how people are working, that I basically expected my world to turn upside down and the industry to turn upside down. And I think it's just starting to turn, but it's not. Basically, things have been a lot more steady and measured than I expected. And so that's also just been a really interesting counterpoint, because sometimes people make these very grand declarations about how AI is going to change everything, and it's there's something more measured in between.
I was just going to say that it seems that those grand statements are the ones that are scaring people the most.
Yeah.
And when you maybe don't feel super confident about your career path or your abilities to, pivot where you are because you're, maybe paycheck to paycheck, stuff like that. It's really scary to hear that this thing is going to come in, take everything away from you, your livelihood, the whole, like your identity, all that stuff. And where do you go from there? That's too frightening. So, and you don't know when it's going to happen too. Cause like with OpenAI, like I was just scrolling through their website. It's like, those are a lot of updates actually.
Now I want to check the website and see.
Seems like just an evolution of what's already possible, and they keep taking it to the next level, like more impressive and impressive features. In my opinion, and this is all a narrative, like was what you just said is one narrative, but the narrative that I like to believe in is that these features will only continue to empower human abilities and like enhance what we're already capable of. And so those are the two distinct narratives that at least I've been hearing. It's like one is AI is coming to take our jobs and we're doomed. And the other one is AI is going to give us superpowers to be more efficient, and we can do more with less, and we can augment our abilities. And that's the narrative that I'm very excited about. And I hope we can convince more people that that's the narrative they should be excited about too.
Yeah, I think the best way to convince people is to help people live it.
Yeah.
And so I'm very excited to share my story and to show people like, hey, here's a very clear, direct example of how it's transformed what I do. And I think very much for the better. I feel like my practice is so much more aligned with how I want to be working now. And, for every person, it's going to look different. But I think it's, I totally understand the way things have been received so far. And I think, I'm really curious, like, how can we help people discover for themselves the ways that they can use, this new technology for their own goals and to help transform their life in a positive way.
I know. I want to encourage folks like ourselves to just tweet about it more, like help educate other people, especially creatives. I definitely want to take that on for myself and like lean into educating others. Not that I'm like an AI pro at all. I am not. But I do very much believe in how powerful it can be for us as creatives. And I want to help convince other people of that too.
Yeah. I think Mia Bloom with Designing with AI does a really good job of it, just showing what you can do, that it doesn't
totally,
you can, augment your practice and make it better, make what you do better. But yeah, there is like a fine line also if we're all gung-ho on it and then it turns out to be good. You know?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of okay. I think to make
I mean, I
it
hate
more
to person.
no, I think it's very real. The
Yeah.
one analogy that I've really kept in my head, I think to make sense of the current moment that we're in, right? I have turned to history and looked at technological innovations of the past and tried to map this current moment onto past moments of just immense change. And the analogy that I gravitate to is towards the invention of plastic as a material. For me as a software designer, these AI models are like a new material to work with, and it behaves differently. It's got emergent properties, and it makes new types of products possible. It makes creating cheaper versions of the existing products also possible. And there's a whole spectrum of reactions to it. There's this book called American Plastic by Jeffrey Makel, which outlines the cultural history of plastic, like the cultural reactions to plastic in the US from its initial invention all the way through the 90s. And honestly, for me, like plastic has been the villain ever since I was a child. Right. And now, like, I actively find ways to avoid using plastic in my day to day life. That's because it's inescapable. But it's also hard. It's like an undeniable truth that it has made so much of modern life possible, so many modern conveniences possible. It's a very complicated legacy. And it's like, I think the discussion that we're having right now and all the possibilities that we see and all the potential downsides that we see, I think they will all come to, they're all possible futures and they could all coexist. The difficulty, I think, in navigating all of this is, it's very easy to reduce everything to one narrative or another. And so I gravitate towards history because I think it helps me recognize that this moment that we are in is not necessarily, even though it is unique, it is not necessarily something that is totally unprecedented and previous generations have never faced it before. Previous generations had their own version of this, and we can learn from how they navigated it and hopefully learn from the pitfalls as well.
I love that. That's such a good reminder that history in some way, shape, or form repeats itself. There's always going to be new inventions that come out. Think of Photoshop, and when we all thought that, what did we think when Photoshop came out? That our jobs were going to be taken by Photoshop or something ridiculous, like equally as.
Yeah. I mean, I remember being at Cooper Type in like 2010. This is not anything to do with Photoshop. But I remember we were learning Font Lab, which is like very hand done. Every letter had to be drawn by hand. And then Glyphs came out like the same year. And Glyphs was almost like automated, the whole thing. And there was a whole freak out like 2010, 2011 with this new technology. It was ruining the industry. And I just remember it being, if you use Glyphs, you're cheating. If you use Font Lab, that's real. But then we're like, wait, why are we not drawing it on paper and then scanning it? Oh, in a scanner, why is that not cheating?
Yeah.
Like, why are you not, why are you not chiseling it out of stone? I'm sorry. Is this like, so it's like every little technological advancement it's eliminating a huge problem. It's meant to fix things. It's meant to push things forward. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about. It's meant to like expedite outcomes in a way, I think.
Yeah.
About it.
Like busy work doesn't have to be part of your day to day. You'll find something else to make your busy work anyway. Like there's no shortage of busy work.
It's true.
People always find a way. Yeah. People always find a way to send emails.
Yeah.
I know we're super over, and I actually have to run to a meeting that I'm a couple minutes late for. I'm sorry we didn't get to answer your mom question.
Oh, it's all good. I think that might be like a good topic for a special episode or something. I would just love to hear from you.
Yes, I have so many thoughts on that. I know Liz does too, and we always talk about it. And so we should totally do a separate episode. But
Totally.
it was so wonderful chatting with you and learning from you and being inspired
Thank
by
you. Thank
And
you. And thank you for having me.
yeah, thanks for
course.
coming and spending time with us.
Yeah.